Hello, welcome back to another F1 fantasy video. My name is Tom and I'm going to be talking about my thoughts very briefly on what happened in France and then going forward into Hungary because we've got that one more race until the summer break. So it's important to get a good team that we're happy with and try and have a good rank basically going into summer break. Just it's nice to not have to dwell on a bit of a disaster, but who knows what's going to happen in Hungary. But we're going to try and predict what's going to happen in Hungary and pick the best team based around that. So this is my team from France. You can see it's fine, 146 points. If Leclerc had finished the race, I would have been looking at 200 points plus, so it would have been a really good week. But yeah, not getting the turbo driver correct is a bit painful. When the turbo driver doesn't deliver, it really does hamper your points. Yeah, so it also kind of shows me that we really need to maximise like the best teams. Carlos Sainz, very close for me, picking between him and Norris, and I ended up going with Norris just because I thought he had a bit more of a higher ceiling, but as it turned out, Carlos Sainz, with Leclerc DNFing, got the fastest lap, beat his teammate, accumulated 32 points. So anyone who went with Carlos Sainz did really well this week. So yeah, and then the rest of the team kind of did well. I did pretty well. My rank climbed up about 20,000 places, so I'm pretty happy with that. And yeah, no one DNF'd from me apart from the turbo driver, so it makes a nice change from what we sometimes see. So we'll have a quick look at the results from France. You can see on the left-hand side here, we've got the hypothetical qualifying on the far left and then straight into qualifying on the left. So it's kind of interesting for you guys if you want to scan over how accurate it was. Some people are very accurate. Some people are within a space or two. Some people are like Gasly, who's had a couple of these incidences. He's predicted up in here in P7. He qualifies in P16. Don't really know what's going on there. Just a bit of inconsistency from Pierre Gasly going from practice into qualifying. But other people were kind of accurate. So interesting to see that. And then again, once again, over here on the column on the right, we can see the fantasy points. The entire purpose of playing this game is to get those fantasy points. So once again, we see very top heavy. The top 5 or 6 places are smashing everyone else out the water basically. So we can really try and pinpoint who's going to finish in the top 4 or 5 ideally, and maximize them on our teams. And then the filler of the budget options to try and pick who's not going to DNF if you can, and potentially like with the Hazes, for example, who are capable of finishing the points. I think try and get the driver who looks on the form at the moment. And speaking of Hazes, I think Magnussen's going to be getting the upgrade, whereas Schumacher won't be getting the upgrade going to Hungary. So if jumping the gun a little bit, Magnussen could be a good option going into Hungary this week if you need that budget option. And one other thing to think about is also for the budget options, about who is climbing those positions, because there's guys that qualify, like the back of the grid. They're not going to score any points they're not going to score points in the same way as the guys that are going to be on the podium. The only way they can really score points is beating their teammate and accumulating points via positions gained. And once again, keeps poking out. He doesn't need here. Lance Stroll, 10 points. If we quickly go across to the homepage on my spreadsheet and scroll across here, once again we highlight Stroll down here. Look at how many points Stroll has gained compared to the rest of the grid from positions gained. It's just kind of staggering to me, to be honest. And he doesn't appear to be in anyone's teams. People I interact with on Twitter and that, and a couple of other YouTubers that do F1 fantasy. Stroll just doesn't feature anywhere. He doesn't, and in fairness, he doesn't feature in my teams as well. But should we be really strongly considering Stroll? Just so consistent, 90 points across the season. It's almost double the next person, who is George Russell, Mr. Consistent over there. Everyone's like, oh yeah, Mr. Consistent. George Russell's consistent, but consistently, finishing races and not DNFing. He's getting so many points that way. Lance Stroll, same way. He's not DNFing. If we quickly pop it back here and move it forward so we can have a look at the team going forward. If we just go down to Stroll, we can see his points are kind of unexciting, but they're so steady. They're so steady, and I want that reliability. If I can afford to get Stroll into a team, I haven't talked up Stroll right now. He's not actually in either of the 2 teams which I'm currently thinking of, just because of the prices, and I want to maximise Max Verstappen because he's on that race streak. So I don't think Stroll's going to get into the team this week. But going forward, I really think we should be strongly considering Lance Stroll, just because as a budget option, if you can afford him over an Albon, if you can't quite afford him, maybe instead of considering a Bottas, you might be looking at Stroll instead. Just look at his points. He hasn't DNF'd. He's just consistently getting 10 plus points, more or less. In fact, I say 10 plus points, we can see exactly how many points. He's averaging 12 points a race, as you can see here on the spreadsheet. So yeah, it's just very interesting for me to see that Stroll is just just ticking along nicely, and he's not in anyone's teams as far as I can see. So yeah, if Stroll is in your team and you've had him this whole time, then well done. Put your hands up, let us know who you are, because maybe he is just the right pick for the season. Anyway, let's have a look at a couple of builds regarding the actual teams that I'm looking for in Hungary. Like I've just said, Max Verstappen, you can see here, nice orange flame. He's on the streak. He's on great form. He just keeps winning races, or at the very least coming second. And I just want him in the team. I don't feel like I need to say much more about Max Verstappen other than that he's just a phenomenal driver. He's in one of the best cars on the grid. Arguably the Ferraris is just edging slightly ahead, but in terms of consistency and actually finishing the races, the Red Bulls are still ahead in that regard. So yeah, Verstappen on a race streak is just very, very kind of an easy pick really to bring him in. We'll also say, I'll just chuck this in here right now, if you haven't used your Mega Driver, this is the last race to use the Mega Driver. Max Verstappen's on this race streak. For me, if you haven't used your Mega Driver already, stick on Max Verstappen right now. Don't think any more about it, because otherwise you're going to lose it. You're going to lose it. We're all going to get a new Mega Driver chip going from Belgium onwards, which is the following race. So yeah, if you haven't used your Mega Driver chip, stick on Verstappen. That's my, pretty easy choice there. So yeah, anyway, this is what's going to happen. We've got Verstappen in there. Norris is going to have to drop down to Magnussen, and I want Magnussen over Schumacher because I've sort of touched on the fact that, from what I gather, from what I've seen on online, Twitter, from what the Hazes have said, it looks like only Kevin Magnussen's getting the upgrade for the Hazes. For whatever reason, Haz are extremely slow at bringing in the upgrades. We don't know exactly how good the upgrade, or how big the upgrade is going to be, but I think they're on a bit of a budget, and this upgrade is very important to them, so they've really taken their time. So I anticipate, with how much time and care they seem to have taken over this upgrade, and the fact that only one car is going to get this upgrade, maybe it is quite a big upgrade, and we should be looking at Magnussen in our teams for sure this week over Schumacher. So for me, Magnussen's just an easy pick. Obviously keep your ears tuned for any further news on those upgrades. If Mick Schumacher is also getting the upgrades, then maybe he's a fine pick as well. But for me, Magnussen's slightly cheaper as well, just makes it a bit easier to fit him into most teams. So yeah, he's in there. So what's happening in the rest of the team? We're going to potentially get rid of Red Bull and bring in Ferrari, because although Ferrari are just, what better way to describe Ferrari as Ferrari, basically, because they just keep messing up. I don't know, it's very frustrating. Like, Leclerc himself admitted he's made a mistake. We've had DNS through reliability issues. There's potential issues with Leclerc's throttle. There's definitely some sort of engine issue, reliability issue, but the Ferraris are frighteningly fast, and if Leclerc had not made that mistake in France, I do believe it's very likely, very, very likely would have won the race, or at the very, worst case, probably would have come second and Max would have won the race. So I do think maximising Ferrari is still fine. When I say maximising, not necessarily on the triple up necessarily, especially not for me personally, because I can't afford it, basically. I can't afford to triple up, because I'd take a -10, and I really, really don't want to take a -10 in terms of substitution. So yeah, I think Ferrari are fine. They do worry me slightly, but they're still fine, and they still, if we go quickly across again here, we can see points per race. They're still hauling in. The top three here are still hauling in. They have been overtaken by Mercedes, interestingly, who are also on a race streak, so tempting for some of you out there, I'm sure. But yeah, I think Ferrari is still fine, and I don't anticipate a DNF every race. Hungary should suit them. That we've seen time and time again this season how well that Ferrari manoeuvres around those tight corners. We saw it in Sector 3 in France. We've seen it, Sector 3 in Spain. That was a big talking point. Through those tighter corners, the Ferraris excel, and for me, Hungary is kind of like a bit like a go-kart track, where there's no real straight apart from the pit straight, which even that isn't particularly a long straight. There's lots of windy corners going through Hungary, and I do anticipate the Ferraris just handling around there should be really good. So yeah, I'm kind of fine going for Ferrari as constructor with this build. And then the other person, obviously, no way can I afford a team like this as much as I would love to. I'd have to drop Alonso down to most likely someone like Alex Albon, who's actually already in the team, so it's not really even a substitution for me. So this is definitely one team that I'm looking at, because there's 4 out of the 6 slots are taken by the best teams, and I've said earlier in the video, I really want to maximise the best teams as much as I can, even though I have concerns over the Ferraris. I still want to maximise them because I still think the high ceiling is there, and they should be finishing these races if they could just get their act together, basically. So, also got to bear in mind that, particularly with Carlos Sainz, for example, Carlos Sainz has got that fresh engine in the back of his car, so there really shouldn't be any reliability issues this early on after putting a new engine in the back of the car. So, yeah, there is also potentially an argument for saying moving the turbo driver over to someone like Perez on here if you don't want to go too hard on Ferraris. Like, Perez just doesn't quite excite me enough to put the turbo driver on. I think Leclerc is still the best option personally, but that the fact that the Red Bulls are not DNFing as much as the Ferraris makes me think, just as when your turbo driver does DNF, it really really hurts your score. So there's a temptation to put it on someone like Perez, but for me, I think Leclerc he should still be up there. I think, although if he DNFs over the next couple of races, maybe I'll be rethinking that. But I still think Leclerc is fine as turbo driver. So this is definitely one build. We get the Max Verstappen race streak. Hopefully an extra easy 10 points. Yeah, that's one build. Let's have a look at the next build. So the other build we're looking at is cutting out the Ferraris and going back to the Red Bulls. I've just spoken about how I still think the Red Bulls are probably the best pick overall. But if we're trying to maximise the slots in our team to fill up with Ferraris and Red Bulls, this team doesn't allow us to do that, but it does give us that sort of double Max Verstappen points. So it gives me personally, if you've got the same sort of budget as me, then you can get the double Max Verstappen points, which is a real big appeal for me personally. It does, however, mean we kind of have to go down to double Has probably, but it does also mean that we can go up to someone like Alonso. So we can have a team that looks like this. This is the second option I'm really looking at. Yeah, I kind of like it. I do kind of like it. Alpine are clearly still fourth best team for me. They're still slightly ahead of the McLarens, even though McLarens have, with their upgrade in France, look a little bit closer. I still think Alonso's a fine pick. Alonso's been a bit of a fantasy joker this entire season, where at the beginning of the season he showed so much promise, and he just kept having things go wrong for him. But the last couple of races, he's really starting to show or deliver on that promise, and he's just sticking around with my team. I just can't get rid of the guy. But why would I want to when he keeps delivering and Alpine are looking strong? So, yeah, I'm happy to just keep Fernando Alonso in with this build. Like I said, it doesn't quite maximise having 4 slots filled with the Ferraris and Red Bulls, so I kind of don't like it for that reason. Also, we could, if we're not fancying Schumacher for whatever reason, Latifi, Williams have just had that upgrade. They do look slightly more competitive. Latifi Latifi is still going to qualified 19th or 20th. So as long as he finishes the race, I still think that Latifi could potentially be a good option. I can just about afford this. So Latifi could be in there for positions gained. Same reason as what I spoke about with Lance Stroll earlier. If I could afford Lance Stroll with this build, then I would. But yeah, this is definitely a team that I'm looking at quite closely as well. It doesn't quite get me any Ferrari coverage apart from Leclerc. So if the Ferraris, as I anticipate, are going to do well, then it doesn't quite get me all the Ferraris. So, but if come practice time and Max Verstappen is looking super strong, then the double up on Max Verstappen here of the Red Bull Constructor is definitely also very tempting. I'm not sure if there's any other way we can. How much money have we got here? 19 million. I wonder if it's possible to get like a Stroll Bottas or something like that. You could argue something like this. For me personally, it's a -10, so I can't do it. I'm just not taking a -10. It's just not worth it when these guys are probably only going to score like 10, 20 points. I'm not taking a -10 to gain 10. It's just stupid. So yeah, for me personally, not doing that. But if you've got the team structure that allows you to easily slot into a team like that, then that's fine. Like Stroll, I do genuinely think going forward, Stroll is potentially a very good option, but just for me personally, not this week. So previously, when Max Verstappen's been on the streak, I've been a bit tentative about putting him in my team because of the budget, but I think my budget's healthy enough now that I don't really need to compromise the rest of my team, to be honest. Post Hungary, I am considering just reverting back to a nice simple template. Could be involving Mr. Reliable Lance Stroll. I don't know why I keep banging on about Lance Stroll in this video, but I just think going forward, he's just in my mind to get in my team at some point as a kind of a budgety option. But yeah, I think this week it's fine. Max Verstappen's on that streak. We don't need to also worry about Mercedes. Mercedes are on that race streak. If you have a quick look here, you can see Mercedes are on a race streak, so maybe there's a temptation for some guys to bring in Mercedes just because they're so consistent and they're on that streak for +10. There is definitely a consideration, but if we're also counting Max Verstappen in here, for me personally, I'm going to have to completely change my team around and I'll probably take a -10, I would imagine. So I'm 1.8 million short of a team like this. I'd have to like cut Alonso, for example, to bring in man of the moment Lance Stroll, and I just don't want to take a -10, because what's the point in taking a -10 just to try and maximise a -10, a +10, sorry, with Mercedes. But going forward, Mercedes are tempting, particularly if they're on a race streak or something. At the moment, they're just on the race streak, and Verstappen's on the race streak as well, so I don't see the point in trying to do both of them, unless, if you can get there without a -10, then maybe it's a consideration. I wouldn't fault you for it. Just want to tag this on the end of the video here, just because upon editing the video, I started thinking more and more about the Mercedes as a constructor, and I was thinking, have I been completely blindsided by the fact that Max Verstappen's on a race streak, and is there a temptation to potentially go with a team like this? This is very much the template team. If we take away the Mercedes and put the Red Bull back in, this is very much just the template team that I've been talking about kind of throughout the season, that's just kind of safe and reliable, and just I'm happy to just have this team. So if generally speaking I'm really pleased with a team like this, is there a world where we just switch out Red Bull for Mercedes? When we go back to the spreadsheet and we look at the points per race, the Mercedes are, like I've said previously, they're already above the Ferraris, and they're not far behind the Red Bulls. And if we add the +10 from a race streak, they could be overtaken the Red Bulls, for example. So there is definitely a consideration. Obviously, Max Verstappen doesn't get covered at all in this build, and is completely counter to what I've been saying for the entire video. Maximize the Max Verstappen. But if we're looking for that kind of safety, we get a couple of Ferraris in there as well. There is a temptation, I'm not going to lie, of having a team like this. So just a kind of a final twist of the tail at the end of the video, just something for you guys to ponder, maybe, if you haven't already thought about it, which is just something that sprung to my mind as I was editing my video, and I was just like, yep, this is something to consider. So yeah, there is obviously no Max Verstappen at all in this build, but Max Verstappen is not the only person that can score points. There are points available for other people. But anyway, just some food for thought. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll catch you in a few days for my final thoughts after the practice session. So cheerio.